Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Doc Hamels, and if you've been watching our series here at Destination Chautauqua on Access Cable 5, we've been doing debates and interviews for candidates that are running for a variety of office. And today, I'm happy to welcome and introduce Lee Hyson, who is running for the position of State Senate. And I want to welcome you, Lee, here to the show. I'm Doc Hamels. If you haven't seen me over on the other side of the fence, Chautauqua Sunrise. And today's purpose will be to basically have an interview with Lee and learn a little bit about him and what he represents and his views on a variety of topics, so that'll help you decide when it comes time to go to the polls on November 8th. So Lee, good afternoon. And we're going to start out with basically is who are you, where you come from, and all that good stuff.
Okay, thanks, Doc.
Sure.
I'm 34 years old. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, and thanks to everyone behind the scenes at Channel 5 for putting this show on. I think that's great. I'm 34 years old. I grew up in Salamanca, New York. That's where my parents grew up, and you know, I have roots in this area. I'm an engineer. I work in upstream oil and gas.
Oh, wow.
And part of the reason that I got involved in politics this year, it's my first time getting into politics, but I had worked overseas. I had, you know, an experience working in Myanmar, some people know as Burma, a few years. And I was there before elections, and, you know, just that experience kind of opened my eyes and gave me a better appreciation for all the things that we have in the United States, things that a lot of times we take for granted. And I saw the John Plum campaign. It kind of inspired me, and I wanted to get involved, and through that process said, you know, nobody ever challenges the state Senate seat. I think I have at least enough background that I could make an attempt at it, and I've learned a lot in the process. I think it's important that people have a choice. That's how democracy works. You know, I've been able to you know, raise some issues and engage in debate, and it's been a good experience, and I think it'll benefit the district to have, you know, to have challengers in these races.
As many of my viewers know, I've run for various offices in my hometown area, and school board and town council, fire commissioner, and legislator, and that. Going from 0 to 60, that's quite a bit of a jump. How's that been for you?
Well, it was a steep learning curve.
I bet.
And you know, just I've had the advantage in a rookie year. And when there was no challenger, I've been able to say, hey, you know, I'm gonna do it my way, in a way that works for me. And so you know, I've had to travel a lot back and forth for work. So sometimes I haven't been able to do all the traditional things that a candidate appears at every event. But you know, I've spent a lot of time researching issues and just going and meeting people and asking them to show me around different things that I don't necessarily, you know, have a day-to-day operation.
Right, sure.
How does this? Can you show me how your power station works, or can you tell me how this nursing home runs, or, you know, whatever the case is. So it's been a really good experience, and I've been able to build up a team of volunteers. I think the organization's the most important thing in running a campaign, especially when you're talking about a district as large as this, which covers Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Allegheny, and southern part of Livingston County. So it's huge territory.
You're burning a lot of rubber to do that. All right. Well, thanks for running. Thanks for you know, being interested in representing all of us in the 57th district. As you say, it's huge, and it's also the farthest west from Albany, so it sort of has a tendency to get lost sometimes, not necessarily at the Senate level, but at the, just in general. You know, we're way out here, and I would get calls from Albany, and they say, can you come to a meeting tomorrow? I go, do you know where we live? So yeah, so it's a big chunk. Lee, you're representing the Democratic Party. The Republicans are holding the state Senate pretty much in power. How, if you were to get to the state Senate, how would you make an impact with that voting bloc?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And one of the things that I've brought up, and you know, one of the criticisms is you want to run, the Democratic Party represents New York City, and New York City liberals, and it's actually I want to represent this area. and especially with a closely balanced Senate, that's when, you know, it's like, what is most important for us here? And then you can leverage that, because if you vote in the opposite direction, you know, it has a major impact. And so you can really leverage that in a close Senate. If the Senate wasn't so closely balanced, you know, that wouldn't be an issue. And so I would look to be able to, you know, I don't intend to be there for a long time. I think there should be term limits, and with that, you know, if I stand up and say, hey, this is what's best for our district, this is what I'm going to go for, and I'm going to break party lines to do it, then that's something that you have to be willing to do, and that you could leverage in those cases. And the second thing, everyone kind of uses the idea that, you know, it's controlled by New York City, but there's a lot of representatives from upstate as well, and I think that regardless of party, there are a lot of issues. And so, you know, we saw it come up with the minimum wage, how minimum wage in our region is being phased in differently than it is in other areas, and we need to look at where a cookie cutter approach isn't always appropriate. And I think that there's other districts, regardless of party lines, that will say, hey, you know what, that represents our area better, because in rural areas you have you know, a distinct set of parameters that are defining how you run schools, how you run hospitals, how you respond with police, and all these different things that maybe have more constraints than they do in an urban area where you have higher population density. So.
That was going to be one of my topics, was the minimum wage. So there's various proposals out there. $15 is the high end, and then I've seen other graduated steps, maybe across a period of years, up to not 15, but maybe $12.50. So do you have a particular position on the minimum wage?
I think the way that it's set to go now, where we're going to go up to $12.50 and then assess what the impact is a smart way to do it. I don't believe in sudden change. I think that kind of is a recipe for chaos, and it's good to do things gradually. And I also think that we do need to raise the minimum wage. If you look at this district in particular, we're three of the poorest counties when you look at average, when you look at incomes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And for the people that say, hey, this is gonna hurt business, it's also the people that are going to benefit most from this are going to be putting the money back into the economy. It's also going to increase spending at these businesses, and it's really, if we're talking about solving the problems in the state, when we look at downstate and we look at costs, whether it's welfare or other government spending, by helping lift people up, we're going to be doing something to actually solve that problem. You got to start somewhere. One point that I would make, I think there should be a distinction for high school students, because we need them to get work experience. It's some of the most valuable learning opportunities you get are your first jobs that go along with it, and so that they're not competing for jobs with people that are trying to support a family, I think is an important distinction to make. And a lot of these things and issues that we're facing now in politics are complicated, complex problems that simple silver bullet solutions aren't going to work for. We're going to need more holistic approaches. And so, you know, talking about this tied in with education, tied in with, you know, whether it's healthcare or how we deal with the heroin epidemic, you know, they're going to require holistic approaches that aren't as simple as we wish they were, to just make it black or white and we're going to do this, we're not going to do that. You know, if we really want to start unraveling some of these problems, it's going to be more complex.
All right. I'd like to move on to some other topics here. One of the things that I think people are just getting weary of is reading about the Albany power bosses that end up being indicted and thrown into jail because they have absconded with millions of taxpayer dollars, favoritism, hiring family members that get paid all this money not to do anything. I'm exaggerating perhaps a little bit, but we already know that at least 2 or 3 in the last probably 3 or 4 years have gone down in disgrace. What would you do? What can you do if elected to help us with that?
Yeah, let's start out kind of with my proposal is that we should start with term limits. And there's arguments on both sides for term limits. It's but I think when you look at on lists and you see New York is, depending on the list, it's always at the top in these good government rankings for bad places. Places that either, we have convictions, but based on the population in New York, they're really not that frequent of populations or convictions. I think we start with term limits. You can serve 8 years, and then you can take a 4-year break. And then if you want to come back, and that's based on, I read about it, a lot of states that came out with term limits, and then they later revised the laws. But so if we do it, let's start with term limits. Let's have the 8-year limit, and then let's see how it is 20 years from now. Let's see if we've
how did it work out?
How did it work out? The same way we're doing with the minimum wage, we'll assess how it is, and we'll continue. I mean, that's the smart thing. You monitor, you feedback, you incorporate that, and then you see what you need to do from there. So I think that's a big issue, but I think it brings up transparency, and transparency is really the solution to all these problems. And it's how are we monitoring? How are we able to conduct the procurement process so that we're able to see where money's going, and it can't just be lowest bid gets it. We need to have transparency to say we hired these guys because they have a track record, but also when we compare it to these guys who had the lower bids, over the last 5 years, the scorecard shows that they didn't deliver on budget. Or
so more than just a low bid.
Yeah, and part of that, I mean, some of those things are in place, but making sure that it's practical, easy to use, and it doesn't slow things down, because that's one of the major things in government is how long it takes for things to happen with bureaucracy. And we don't need to add to bureaucracy. We need to simplify, make easy to use, create transparency. So then you don't have why are we doing this instead of this type of thing, and that comes in the transparency. Then you learn, okay, how did this one go? We can look back, we can analyze everything, what the costs were, and then we put that into the next round, and you learn as you go, and you don't just do it because this is the way we got to do it to give him the job or whatever, and that's kind of the solution, I think.
I'm smiling because the way you're talking is a lot of what I teach in supervisory and management courses at JCC. It's a process of all the things you're talking about, and step by step by step. You try something, you monitor it, you try it, you go back, tweak it, and continue, and so on. So it makes sense. Let's move on to probably, maybe the top 3 issues that keep popping up. And I don't have to tell you, you said you've been in debates already, but job creation. Said that we're in one of the poorer areas of New York State, and I agree. We're in that area. Good paying jobs, family sustaining wage jobs. What are your thoughts on that? How do we get some of that business this way?
Yep. So my kind of, I guess, when you talk about this, there's kind of short term, medium term, long term. The first thing that I would focus on, because I think it would have the most impact as quickly as possible, is focusing on the regional identity. So while Buffalo is making headlines with adding jobs and everything, we are known as a recreational, our district is known for recreational destinations. We need to capitalize on that. I travel all over the place. People ask me, where are you from? I say, Salamanca, New York. And they're like, oh, I want to go and see the new World Trade Center. I have to say, it's not New York City. It couldn't be further away.
I get that too.
And so then you kind of go into explaining where you're from. And really, if you think about a place like the Adirondacks, you just say, oh, the Adirondacks, and people have an image in their head. I think we have I Love New York. We should have I Love Wild Western New York that starts to create some imagery and does more of a better job of marketing our region as a world-class destination in terms of our waterways and natural tourist attractions, whether it's the parks, the lakes, or anything. And so we do a good job, here with Chautauqua Lake and Cattaraugus County with Holiday Valley and Ellicottville and everything around there. But there are many other great destinations as you continue to go east. and we need to do a better job of taking advantage of that. What it'll do in terms of the economy and job creation, we have a lot of seasonal jobs that if we do a better job identifying, okay, where did the seasonal jobs drop off? Focusing on our waterways, I think, is a big way, because we have some wintertime jobs. If we focus a better job on the Allegheny River, better job on Allegheny State Park in terms of not just coming and camping, but camps, learning experiences, internship opportunities, that sort of things. You build up this I love wild western New York, and then there's more opportunities that grow from there.
Okay.
In terms of a long-term strategy, I think everyone's talking about green energy and building manufacturing jobs, and there's going to be a lot of competition across the country for those. I think where we should be focusing is on microgrids in our communities as kind of a bridge. So these are smaller projects. So in Olean, there's a solar project that will benefit St. Bonaventure University. But we look at these small-scale, kind of independent microgrids that could be built and benefit schools, hospitals, nursing homes, places that benefit from public investment, that'll spur local companies to work in these new areas and just kind of give business a focus on, hey, we're going to get more into geothermal, or we're going to look into micro hydro electricity generation, because right now we're spending a lot of money on really big scale green energy investments that the overall grid's not ready for. And if we're spending a ton on these wind energy projects because we want to reduce greenhouse gases, but the grid's not ready to transmit that energy from here down to demand centers in New York City or on the East Coast, and in the meantime, then we have to fire up coal-powered power plants more, so that we have so we don't have blackouts like they had in California years back. We need to look at these microgrids, and it would be a way of kind of stabilizing as we prepared the grid. It'd be a way to invest in local communities and for places to ease their operating budgets that depend on government. So I think that's it's a good strategy, and if you're looking to the next 40 years, it's something that helps make our grid more resilient, because you have more places that can operate independently than require input from one big destination. And overall, when you're looking at changes in weather, whether it was like Superstorm Sandy or whatever the concern would be, then that's making the grid more resilient.
Wow, interesting concepts. Okay, let's move along. You were coming up with a concept of the Wild West New York. I like it. I live in the Wild West. I live in Ripley, which is the last stop on the thruway. And if you live in the Wild West of Chautauqua County, we got a lot of hunters. We got a lot of people with their pistol permits and that. Everywhere you go, repeal the SAFE Act, do this, do that. They've tried to repeal parts of it because it didn't make necessarily sense to the locals. What's your position on gun control and the SAFE Act?
Yeah, this was early on. This was something that came up a lot, and I met with the scope group in Cattaraugus County and kind of educated myself on the SAFE Act. I think overall it was legislation that was kind of thrown together in a hurry, and just an example of really bad, poorly done. And I think what we need to do as leaders is look at what we actually intend to do. And so I think if you look at the SAFE Act, they tried to do it right after there was a shooting. And really what I think everyone can agree on is we don't want to see violence with guns. And everybody around here, we're not having massive crime waves with guns. And so I did some research. I looked at the assault weapon ban that happened in the 90s. And all the research showed that there was no reduction, by banning those weapons, there was no corresponding reduction in crime with those weapons. And so, to me, in the SAFE Act, that's one of the big issues. So, like the AR style, banning the AR style weapons. And so, if you're trying to solve a problem, and in the process just angering
Right.
the people that it's going to affect most instead of engaging with them, that's a bad strategy. And so my overall feeling is, yeah, we need to solve the problem of violence with guns. We're not going to do it with unfunded mandates in a law. We're not going to do it by saying you can't get these. There was a study from the Attorney General in New York State showing that we had a rise in out-of-state guns, all the guns that
I saw that. It was in our paper the other day.
Yep. And so my thought is, so I have my pistol permit. When I did my pistol permit, I had to go and see my neighbors. It was a process. So I would say, people that like target shooting and do that, want an AR with a 50, put that gun in the same category that you put your pistol. So when you apply for your pistol permit, and we'll work together. We'll say, hey, this is where we do it. Just because whatever we can argue about it, but you're going to do a lot more damage with one of those if you decide that you're going to become violent than you are with your 20 gauge that you take out in the backyard to shoot clays. And you do your hunter safety class so you can get your rifle or your shotgun, and then you go through a little more vigorous process to get your pistol permit or to get higher powered, however you want to classify rifles.
Yeah. Okay. So I asked this question of Jason Perdue, who was here last week. So if you were the successful candidate to be state senator, you would go up to Governor Cuomo and say you messed up on that law.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not that silly because he'd be like, who are you?
Yeah. What I mean is you're going to go to Albany and
absolutely.
You have to take him on.
And before I went up to him, what I would do is I would go and the state's big, and regardless of party, there's a lot of other people across the state that feel the same way. Right. And so you go with them, and I did this early on. I reached out to a few candidates, Leslie Danks Burke and Kenan, I don't remember his last name, but I emailed some other Democratic candidates from districts, east of here, and said, hey, this is what I think, and they had pretty much already, been set. They were already on board, and it's something that people know needs to be done, needs to be done in an effective way.
Okay, great. I don't know how this ranks, but it's got to be in the top two, anyways. The heroin epidemic that we're faced with. We just had a big debate with the candidates for district attorney, and we talked quite a bit about drug use and so forth. This thing's getting out of hand here in Chautauqua County at the heroin level. What do you do as state senator? I mean, what do you handle? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So this year, I'm really glad this election season, this issue's been getting coverage that it deserves, and this is, everyone says this is an epidemic. What I would do, so everything that the state's doing, they're kind of doing the obvious steps of making sure the hurdles that were in place with insurance are being taken away, so that if somebody goes in, they have to get treatment for the first, I think, 48 hours before insurance can step in. We're stepping up what we do with enforcement and what law enforcement can do. You're seeing tons of community training because this is something that's affecting so many people that you're seeing grassroots community organizations get involved. But with addiction, it's a cycle, and it's something that whatever we're doing now, we can kind of try to stomp out heroin, which came about from prescription drug abuse, which one of the best things the state's done is the monitoring and cutting so that doctors can monitor the prescriptions and make sure that instead of giving a 30-day, they're giving shorter time frames, and then you can come back and kind of creating more transparency in that process and allowing to identify when abuse is taking place, which is important. But I think if you really want to break it down, what we need to look at are the transitional living solutions after people go into recovery, because when somebody wakes up in the morning and they're addicted, their brain's operating differently, and so a lot of the solutions that people say, well, just tell them they got to do this and they'll do it, and it's like, no, it's their brain has been rewired through the use of chemicals to continue going on this same path. And in order to rewire your brain, it's like you know, if you break your leg, you're going to go through physical therapy.
Sure.
And in order to rewire your brain, you know, it's a slow process, and you're not going to do it immediately, and you're not going to do it in 21 days. Maybe there's a handful of people that are, and that's great. But for the majority of people, in order to recover, they need a better environment, and we need to do a better job of creating that model of treatment that doesn't currently exist on an accessible scale for everybody. And I think in this area, what we should focus on with low population density are farms. And so what we're looking at are places that people can go to be in a positive environment and set up positive routines for themselves, working. And here we have farmland. A lot of the complaints about transitional living is, you know, neighborhood.
No, not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard, and it's, yeah, we need to do something, but do it somewhere else or whatever. And this is an opportunity to, you know, help solve that problem with the resources that we have here in the district.
Okay.
And that.
So you have a plan?
And it's also an analog. So I copy that from the American Legion's plan for helping homeless veterans, and it's basically recognizing we can't just give the guy a meal and a clean shower and say your problem's solved.
Yeah.
You know, you can read about how they did that and wiped out the problem of homeless veterans in several states. And you know, and it's the same type of taking a holistic approach, helping people take care of health problems, deal with mental health, and then help rebuild through positive, you know, daily routines.
Lee Hyson's been my guest today, folks, and we are down to about a minute and a half left. You made my job very easy. You're prepared and you have a lot of plans and suggestions. So I'm just sitting back here listening to it. So it's been a pleasure to meet you and to learn more about your thinking. Lee, you got about a minute or so to take on your own to tell the viewers why they should vote for you. Anything else that you want to share? It's all you.
All right. Well, thanks for having me today, Doc. This was this was pretty exciting being on TV.
It is.
And you know, if you're interested in learning more about any of my ideas, I have a website that's leehyson.com.
Okay.
And you know, I'm just really happy. I hope everybody informs themselves and then goes and votes on Tuesday. So.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up here. So, so you'll be representing at this point the Democratic Party for the New York State Senate race for District 57, correct?
That's correct.
And so we encourage all of you that are watching, as we did earlier, to get out and vote on November 8th and do your homework. Like you said, if you want to learn more about Lee, go to leehyson.com and see what he has to say, and hopefully you'll look at this show over and over again till you make up your mind which way you want to go. Well, folks, it's a wrap. I'm out of time, so I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm Doc Hamels. You've been watching Destination Chautauqua, and I'll see you next Saturday on my show, Chautauqua Sunrise at 9 a.m., and we got a great show on veteran services. We'll hope to see you next time. You take care, and get out and vote on November 8th.